From my considerable correspondence, both email and over the phone, I've come up with some ideas here, suggestions and guidelines that I consider helpful because everybody's interested in an accurate rifle. We have to build an accurate rifle, we have to follow some basic guidelines of precision for accuracy. And where this really starts is, we'll start here, for instance, with factory rifles. Now, a factory rifle, when it comes from the factory, there's various things that haven't been done to that rifle to make it acceptable for accuracy. The first thing that we need to consider is the dimensional aspects of the groove diameter of the barrel. The groove diameter of the barrel. 30 caliber is 0.308. Now, a quality barrel, regardless of whether it's factory or a custom barrel, should be on size. That means that it shouldn't be 309 or 310 or something of that nature. And I gauge all barrels. Gauge all barrels on factory rifles and other barrels from custom makers and one thing another. And some of the custom makers are proud enough of their barrels that they designate right exactly on the barrel what the groove diameter of the barrel is. Not everybody does this. Only a couple people do this. And I might say that I bought barrels from Hart Rifle Barrels for many, many years, and every barrel that comes out of Hart shop has the groove diameter wrote right on the side of the barrel when you get it. Now, we've got people that make barrels, and they might stamp the breech of the barrel, but that might not be what the actual size of that barrel is. And I've determined this by simply gauging the barrel. So, there are very few people that have bore gauges. I've had bore gauges for years because I needed them being a machinist. If I made holes, reamed holes, whatever it might happen to be for certain fits, I needed gauges. So I have gauges to gauge these holes. Now this is where some of these things start. The next thing is the proper bedding of the rifle, the proper glass bedding of the action to the stock. And I almost, in any instance where it's possible, to bed about somewhere between an inch and a half of the breech of the barrel ahead of the action. This is to stabilize things. You got to understand that a barrel hangs out here 20 inches to 28, 26 to 28, 30 inches, whatever, a barrel. Well, there needs to be some support, and everything needs to be done all at the same time. You don't bed part of it and then bed part of it later or anything else. When it's all set together, it has to be bedded all at the same time. The action, the recoil lug area, and a section of the barrel, and the tang. People, I take rifles apart, people haven't bothered to bed the tang. Well, that means that when you tighten things down, the things are going to torque a little bit, they're going to bow a little bit. That's not what you want. You want it absolutely, totally level. When that all goes together and it's torqued down, it needs to be all the same. So our locking lugs need to contact. And on any rifle that's built, in any rifle, any barrel action, for the most part, except in certain, very sophisticated situations where some of these injection molding processes allow a stock to be made perfectly and an action fit that perfectly. There are instances where this is actually done in a factory rifle. But don't get the impression that just because it's got some sloppy glass bedding stuck in it, that it's okay. Or don't get the impression that just because you bought a rifle or bought a stock to stick on your rifle with an aluminum bedding block that it's going to be true. Virtually none of them are true because of tolerances and one thing or another. Everything needs to be bedded properly so that it fits properly. Now we're going to go into the aspects of a rifle chamber. All chambers have a throat section, and that throat section might be simply just a 1.5 degree taper per side. There's no actual free bore as it's been described. In other words, bullet diameter, let's say 308 bullet diameter. Let's say that the diameter of the throat is 308.5. That's 308.5 thousandths. And that free bore length is, let's just say for instance it's 1/4 inch long. Well, you see, this is where we start to get off into a real broad area here where things haven't been considered properly. When I build rifles, I specifically throat the barrels in most instances for what we're going to do, what we're going to load, what we're allowed to be able to load according to our magazine box length and the bullets that we're using at hand. But this can change very suddenly, going from a regular bullet without a plastic tip. Those bullets are by necessity in design and ogive shape of the bullet. Those bullets are considerably shorter. So our throat may be proper for those types of bullets. But don't expect to load Burger bullets, any of the Accubond, Interbond type of bullet with that long plastic tip. That adds somewhere between 125 and maybe 150 thousandths or more. And the actual shape of the ogive may actually add some more length. All of a sudden now we got an overall cartridge length where we can't get close enough, we can't get to our lands, and if the rifle's not throated properly. So to build a rifle, we need to take these things all into consideration. And just because the specs call out from SAMI, a SAMI designated cartridge that's been accepted, that might not necessarily mean that SAMI dimension is a proper dimension. And somebody says, well, it's on specs. Well, maybe and maybe not. The other aspect is some companies have reamers made. I'm talking about manufacturing, rifle manufacturing, that actually the throat is too damn long for almost anything that you could possibly load in that cartridge from a hand loading standpoint. You know, and these bullets that with the long point and the long ogive, this changes the entire aspect of everything. And this takes up a considerable amount of my answering questions and heading people in the right direction with something. If we're trying to use something and we're jumping a bullet, let's say, I know instances where these chambers, that the damn free bore is 300, 400 thousandths long, way too long. Well, that free bore is fine if you can seat the bullets to proper depth in the case and still get out near your rifling, say 20, 30 thousandths off your rifling. But it's sure as hell not to specs if you can't load for accuracy. And this is what hand loading from the very beginning has really been all about, and this is where we improve on everything. And this is what I've built my business on, is accuracy. Accuracy first. When you get accuracy, by precision. You don't get it with sloppiness. And, you know, we run into some dimensional characteristics and one thing or another to do with these bullets. We run into dimensional characteristics to do with certain cartridge manufacturers, brass, and one thing or another. And I prefer to know, especially if it's some of these later things, that there's not very much selection as far as cartridge brass out here. I prefer to have the cartridge brass at hand for the particular rifle that I'm building. I don't work up loads for every rifle that I build. Some people don't ask for it, but in the instance that I do, you know, everything has to fit. And it fits according to what I have checked. Let's say it's a Winchester cartridge that with the rifle's chambered for, I'm going to use Winchester brass, and so forth. If it's a Weatherby, I'm going to use Weatherby brass, and so forth, a Nosler, whatever it might happen to be. But we've got to understand that, you know, when rifles are built and chambered, as a rule, you know, there are headspace gauges made for that particular cartridge designation. And along the line, there are things that get kind of crossed up between actual cartridge dimensions and headspace gauges and one thing or another. I've encountered almost any situation that you can that you can describe. But the main thing is, I try the brass in the rifle. And certainly if I've worked up loads, the brass that I've used, but that does not mean that cartridge brass that's out there is going to fit in that rifle from some other manufacturers, especially if it's a foreign manufacturer. It may be entirely different, and you got to understand some of those things. And this brings up a whole nother aspect. Many years ago, I don't know now, I guess it's 60 some odd years ago, maybe longer, the great gunsmith, the gunsmith's gunsmith, the great P.O. Ackley, you know, he designed some improved cartridges. He just simply put a 40-degree shoulder on all of his cartridges. Let's say it's a 25-06 improved, and you can fire factory rounds. Well, I've encountered all sorts of situations with other people's work to do with chambering Ackley improved cartridges, and I learned early on when I was going to gunsmithing school what these dimensions need to be, so that when you close up the bolt on, say, a factory 25-06 cartridge improved in an improved chamber, that bolt should become a little bit snug. That means that that cartridge is confined in the chamber, and you're not going to have headspace. Well, unfortunately, I learned here in the past few months that there are actually reamer grinders, people making headspace gauges, that they're wrong, that they're simply wrong for the Ackley improved chamber. If you use their headspace gauge, yeah, you're going to have headspace all right. You're going to have headspace somewhere in the neighborhood of about 9 thousandths of headspace, longer than what it should be. And this is not a good condition. I don't know who got onto this to begin with. I don't know why it's happened, but I've encountered it. And having had headspace gauges made by, I won't mention the name, one of our prominent reamer grinders. Now we kind of get off into another area here. We've got people in the business. We've got mainly two entities renting chamber reamers, headspace gauges, gunsmithing tools. And one particular individual would like to make everybody believe that all of his tools are to specifications. Horse pucky. Or to specifications of what? Is it something that's right or is it wrong? I encountered this headspace gauge situation from one of the rental reamer people. And I've never had a problem from the other rental reamer people. I won't mention who it was, but you need to be aware. And when you get something, you need to check everything out before you ever cut your chamber. You need to pay attention. You need to have cartridge cases. If you're cutting an acme chamber, you sure as hell need virgin cartridge cases that have not been touched to make sure that when you close the bolt on a properly chambered acme chamber, that there's some resistance. If you've got tools, that means gauges and reamers that don't give you that situation, they're wrong, folks. They're flat wrong, and they've been wrong for years. And I've wondered for many, many years why I encountered so many acme chambers that were too long. That's because somebody's got the wrong dimensions. They've misunderstood what acme did, what the purpose was. He did it purposely so that things would headspace up correctly. And acme's description was the go gauge when you chamber one of my chambers becomes the no-go gauge. So that means that if you've got a go gauge for, say, a 30-06 and you're chambering a 25-06 acme improved or 270 acme improved or 30-06 acme improved, because you're using the same gauge in every instance, that you basically, instead of cutting to that depth, you need to cut your chamber right at 4,000 to 5,000 shorts. That was Acme's original recommendations. But the thing that I'm describing to you is we've got gauges out here coming with reamers from at least one rental outfit that the gauges are wrong. Well, it's a problem of theirs, and it's a problem of the people who made it. You know, I happened onto this by chance after many, many years of figuring these things out. The only way that you get accuracy is with precision, and it's either done right or it's done wrong. And I know how to do it the right way. I learned how to do it the right way, and I do it the right way. And, you know, barrel dimensions, throat dimensions, these are some really important aspects. And headspace has to be adhered to. I chamber everything in every instance that I can to minimum headspace. And I have a variety of cartridge brass and whatnot from various makers, and I double check everything. I don't just go by the headspace gauge. I use these cases also to make sure that we don't have an undue sloppy fit in a chamber. This is not what we want. We don't need to have to rework these things. We need to do it the first time around. And by understanding these aspects, you'll avoid some of these pitfalls that you're going to get into, especially this one that I just described, which I consider quite a serious mistake. And I guess it's up to them to correct it. And while I'm at it here, over a number of years ago, I don't know, it's been about 3 years ago, I put out a video on the situations where the 6.5 Creedmoor and there was ammunition that wasn't fitting, tractor rifle chambers and correctly chambered rifles with the headspace gauges that are made. And I've never encountered a situation where the headspace gauges have been wrong, but we've still got cartridge brass out here in that caliber that there still are conditions. It has never seemed to shake completely out, because I still get some correspondence. And not so long ago, they came out with a 6mm Creedmoor. Well, it's still there. I just had a phone call from somebody day before yesterday. He and his friend had a couple of rifles barreled by two different gunsmiths in different parts of the country, and both the chambers appear to be exactly correct but they bought 10 boxes of Hornady factory ammunition and not one round of ammunition would go in their rifles. Well, that's a real slick deal. So somebody didn't learn the first time around in this process. I first discovered from Hornady aspects what they do with Hornady brass and ammunition, and here we are now with Hornady ammunition that won't go in a correctly chambered 60mm Creedmoor. So you see, this isn't a situation where this is done purposely. Somewhere along the line, something got crossed up. A dimensional aspect, somehow or another. There's something been amiss from the very beginning. There's manufacturing tolerances, but there's also such a thing as working tolerances. And we've got to have a working tolerance that allow factory ammunition and or cartridge brass of that specific caliber to be able to be used. So I don't mean to rile up anybody. I'm not bad-mouthing the cartridge. I never bad-mouthed the 6.5 Creedmoor. I simply have told everybody that listens and watches my YouTube series about these situations. And this is how we learn. Every day that I build rifles, every day I learn something. I learned this situation from a man yesterday. I learned some other situations from another man today. Things going on. You know, factory ammunition that is loaded way, way, way over pressure to the point where it locks the bolt up with factory ammunition. I've learned about situations like this. I'm not talking about the Creedmoor, any of the Creedmoor line of cartridges. I'm talking about something else. And you see, when these things are done at the factory, there are tests that they have to meet, and one thing another. Now, if ammunition gets out, and rifles are chambered properly, and ammunition gets out that's loaded so heavily that it locks up a rifle bolt, this is quite a situation. And somewhere along the line, something missed there. And we don't need these situations. But the whole entire purpose of everything I've had to say in this particular video is all to do with precision. We've got to have some procedures here. We've got to have some checks and measures to make sure that these things are correct. And if they're not correct, they create problems, and it gives us some conversation. It gives us something to talk about. It creates a situation where people can actually learn from these things, but you have to learn from it to correct it. And evidently, this has been quite a learning curve, to do with some of these situations. And these things are going to go on, Everybody's human, and there's things that go on, the things that happen, but there's also things, where things just aren't followed from the quality control aspect to make sure that these things don't surface and create problems.